names all seen. Hey, did you hear about the Scarecrow who won a Lifetime Achievement Award? He was the best at what he did. Chumlee from Pawn Stars, the funny guy everyone knew and laughed with, found himself in the middle of a shocking scandal that almost destroyed his life. One minute he was the goofy guy making deals in the shop, and the next his home was being searched by police, who found things no fan expected. Watch this, because what happened next changed everything, and not just for Chumlee. Austin Lee Russell, better known as Chumlee, was born on September 8, 1982, in Henderson, Nevada. He got the nickname Chumlee when he was 12 years old because someone's dad thought he looked like a walrus from an old cartoon, and the name stuck. As he grew up, he became close with Corey Harrison, whose family ran the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas. This small shop would eventually become reality TV gold, but before the fame and fortune, one twist of fate. By the time Pawn Stars came out on TV in 2009, Chumlee had already worked at the shop for 5 years. He was the joker, the person who got pranked, and the guy that everyone thought wasn't smart, but it turned out he had a knack for finding valuable collectibles, especially video games, sneakers, and pinball machines. His silly personality made him a fan favorite, and he made the most of it by starting his own business selling merchandise, which was even more successful than Pawn Stars. This is where you'll find your $20,000 diamond bracelets, which brings me to our women's case. If you want to buy a nice ring for your girlfriend, don't go to Tower of Jews, you'll waste too much money there, come here instead. But things weren't always going well for Chumlee. His life started going in a direction no one saw coming, and it all fell apart when the police showed up at his house. That's when things got real. In 2016, police raided his home as part of, they looked into a serious case and found, well, let's just say it wasn't your average pawn shop inventory. They found guns and illegal drugs. It wasn't a good look. Suddenly, Chumlee went from being a TV star to being charged with multiple felonies. In this situation, most people would panic, but Chumlee was smart. Instead of going to trial, he made a deal, pleaded guilty to a couple of charges and avoided jail time. Instead, he got probation, had to take some classes, and was basically told to keep his nose clean. Chumlee's health also got worse over the years. Over the years, fans noticed that his weight changed a lot. At his heaviest, he weighed 350 pounds. He tried dieting, working out, and other things, but nothing worked. He thought, 350 is great, go hang out with my dad, have a few drinks, bet on a few games and have a good time, put the money to good use. Eventually he decided to go all in and get gastric sleeve surgery. The results were amazing. He lost over 160 pounds and completely changed his lifestyle. He went from having health problems to now preaching about balance and fitness. It was a complete change. Even though he had setbacks, he didn't go away. In fact, he expanded his businesses. Have you heard of Chumlee's Candy on the Boulevard? He opened it up across from the pawn shop and started selling nostalgic sweets, which fans loved. He also tried his hand at gaming and even released his own retro-style video game, showing that he has an eye for more than just pawn goods. When things were going well, tragedy struck the Pawn Stars family in early 2024 when Corey's brother Adam Harrison died of what was thought to be a fentanyl overdose. This was a big blow to Rick and the rest of the crew, and it also brought attention to the opioid crisis, which Rick has since spoken out against. Losing Adam was terrible, but the show had to go on, and it did. Chumlee was still on the show, even though his life had been a roller coaster, going from working in a pawn shop to being on a reality TV show. Fame, legal trouble, health problems, and personal losses. But Chumlee knows how to get back on his feet, whether it's in business, health, or just staying relevant in the always changing world of TV. He's not giving up anytime soon, and fans can't wait to see what crazy thing happens next in the life of Pawn Stars' most unpredictable character. But the wild ride doesn't end there. Long before the legal trouble and the weight loss, Chumlee was making waves in the pond. In his own unique way, he was always interested in old video games, vintage sneakers, and sports memorabilia. For him, it wasn't just about making money. He loved the thrill of the hunt. One of the most memorable deals he made on Pawn Stars was for a rare, mint-condition copy of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The seller wanted $70,000, but the shop could only offer $660,000. Chumlee couldn't help but wonder how much that game would be worth today. Someone once brought in a huge collection of Pokemon cards, including several very valuable Charizard cards. At the time, Rick wasn't sure about the deal and decided not to go through with it. Now that the value of rare Pokemon cards has skyrocketed, Chumlee has publicly asked if that was one of the best business opportunities in Pawn Stars history. The pawn shop was never just about making money, it was also about learning about history and what makes certain things so valuable. There were some smart moves Chumlee made. But there were also some mistakes. For example, you think your little fake lottery ticket full of "me come on big hose" so you knew it was a joke the whole time? I knew that ticket was fake. I get them all the time and give them to people because I think they're funny. For example, he once got Rick to buy a collection of antique dolls that turned out to be worth much less than they thought. Rick wasn't too happy about that one, despite Over the years, Chumlee became an expert in his own right. He loved old pinball machines, could spot a fake sneaker from a mile away, and knew a lot about sports collectibles. He proved that he wasn't just a funny guy, he had a real place in the pawn business. But Chumlee had other interests besides the pawn shop. He was a huge fan of old-school hip-hop, loved collecting rare sneakers, and was obsessed with cars. Over the years, he built up an impressive collection of his love for cars got him into a few car shows where he could show off his favorite rides. Corey Harrison made a lot of moves, but not all of them paid off. He was involved in drunk driving, family fights, and business mistakes. Corey Harrison, better known as Big Host from Pawn Stars, has had a wild ride at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in Las Vegas. His journey, which has been full of ups and downs, began when he was a kid working in his family's business. Corey proved his worth over the years by managing operations, making big purchases, and keeping the shop running smoothly. But despite his efforts, things did not go as planned, and he eventually lost his share of the business. This wasn't just because he made bad choices. It was a mix of family problems, personal struggles, and some unfortunate turns of fate. Corey was born into the pawn world, with his grandfather Richard Harrison and his father Rick running the shop by the time he was 9 years old. He started out as an apprentice and worked his way up until he was in charge of the daily operations and over 30 employees, which was no easy feat. He was also known for having a good eye for valuable items and buying more than anyone else in the shop. But things weren't always easy. His decisions to buy expensive items sometimes went against his father and grandfather's more cautious approach, which led to many heated arguments. The reality TV show Pawn Stars brought the shop worldwide fame. Corey was an important part of it, and his appearances on the show went beyond just business. He also appeared on other TV shows, like iCarly, as a down payment on a getaway cottage called Peggy's Cabin. I'm still wanting to stay there, and I'm asking $75,000. While his acting career was booming, his personal life was a different story. He married Karina Harrison, better known as Kiki, in 2017, but broke up a year later because their work schedules didn't work together. Despite the divorce, they had a son, named Richard Benjamin Harrison, after Corey's grandfather. This wasn't his first failed marriage. He was also married to his high school sweetheart Charlene and divorced her in 2015. One of the worst things that happened in Corey's life was a car accident in September 2023. He was arrested for DUI after his truck was seen swerving into a bike lane in Las Vegas. When police pulled him over around 2 in the morning, noticed Corey's bloodshot eyes and strong alcohol smell. He said he had only one drink on the flight from Minnesota, but the sobriety test showed otherwise. He failed the test, and later blamed it on an infected shin on the uneven pavement where he was tested. The breathalyzer machine malfunctioned, so they took a blood sample, which led to his arrest. This incident not only got him in trouble with the law, but it also hurt his reputation badly. He was fired from Pawn Stars and had to say sorry, promising to get help. Corey has had his fair share of health problems. He once weighed about 400 pounds and had lap band surgery in 2014 after learning he was pre-diabetic. The surgery helped him lose almost 200 pounds, and he committed to living a healthier life. But his health wasn't the only thing that was bothering him. The death of his younger brother Adam Harrison in January 2014, even though Adam wasn't on Pawn Stars, hit him hard. His death was a devastating blow to Corey and his family. My mother had gotten the ring given to a person in power with ties to the mob families raped her. Corey shared a picture of the two of them as kids on social media and talked about his sadness in a public way. Corey's grandfather, Richard Oldman Harrison, died in 2018. His grandfather wasn't just family, he was also a mentor and the backbone of the pawn shop. Richard's death left a huge hole in the family and the business. Corey had worked with his grandfather for years, learning from him and picking up his advice. The pawn shop would not be the same without the old man's tough but fair leadership. Despite all of these problems, Corey built a strong financial base. His net worth is estimated to be around $4 million, thanks to his share in the pawn shop, TV salary, book sales endorsements, business ventures, and smart real estate investments. He co-owned a restaurant with Chumlee and launched a clothing line. His social media presence, with millions of followers, also helped him stay in the spotlight. Things took a turn in season 7 of Pawn Stars. Corey was upset that he didn't feel like he owned the shop, even though he had done a lot of work for it. He told his father and grandfather that they had to give him a 10% stake in the business or he would leave. This was a bold move, given how deeply rooted the business was in family ties. Rick and Richard countered with a 5% offer, which Corey accepted. It wasn't what he had originally asked for, but it was still a big step toward securing his place in the family business. Even though Corey didn't get what he wanted. He finally owned a piece of the shop, but things didn't go as planned over time. His personal problems, legal issues, and changing family dynamics caused him to lose control of the business. Whether it was because of bad timing, financial decisions, or internal conflicts, some items hold real history, while others are just interesting stories. When mafia artifacts arrived in Las Vegas, they were some of the craziest artifacts related to the mob that have ever been sold at the Pawn Star shop. This isn't just a history lesson. These are the real deal. First, there's what's said to be the signet ring of Charles Lucky Lugano, one of the most powerful and feared mafia bosses in history. This thing wasn't just for looks, it stood for power, authority, and probably a lot of violence. If someone else had gotten their hands on it back then, let's just say things wouldn't have gone well for them. The man who brought it in said it had been in his family for decades, and was passed down by his mother. It was said to have deep ties to the mob, but there was no paperwork or solid proof. There was just a great story in a ring with some serious vibes. It has a devil's face, ruby eyes, and even a tiny diamond tear. Basically, it screams that bad things have happened while this was around. The seller swore it was real and even mentioned an FBI agent who recognized it over the phone. But history doesn't mean anything without hard evidence. Lucky's name is important in business, but if it can't be proven, it's just a fancy piece of jewelry and not a six-figure payday. Now, if you want to talk about mob legends, you have to talk about Al Capone. Someone came into the shop saying he had the real keys to Capone's cell at Cook County Jail, not Alcatraz. This is where Capone cooled his heels before going to the big leagues of federal prison. The keys looked real, big, old, and made for some seriously heavy-duty locks. The story was even better. They supposedly belonged to a retiring officer who had been Capone's personal jail guard for a short time. The problem was that there was no proof, no paperwork, and no chain of custody. All they had was a good story and some old metal, which in the world of collectibles wasn't enough. The seller wanted over $1,500 for them, but without anything linking them directly to Scarface, they were just expensive pieces of iron that were cool and worth a lot of money. Now things get really interesting. A guy shows up with a vintage 16mm film, supposedly shot in a speakeasy in the Roaring '20s, a place known for having some of Chicago's most dangerous criminals. Even Wilder's gun was found in that speakeasy, and he thought that the footage might show Babyface Nelson or one of Capone's girlfriends. The mission began in 1920, when different organized crime gangs sold alcohol all over Chicago. This could be a really cool look into the history of prostitution in Chicago, but there was a catch. First, the film had a date stamp of 1938, which threw that theory out the window. Then there was the gun, which was a brass Otis Smith revolver from the late 1800s, but not the rare model that collectors really cared about. So even though the story was interesting, neither the film nor the pistol were worth enough to make the deal worthwhile. It was a fun piece of mob history, but not exactly a jackpot. From time to time, something comes through the shop that just stops people in their tracks. One of those times was a huge armored 1928 Cadillac VI8. This wasn't just any old classic car. It was said to have belonged to Al Capone himself. If that were true, it would be one of the most valuable gangster artifacts ever. Unlike the other things on this list, this car had paperwork and a long history that proved beyond a doubt that it was Capone's personal ride. This wasn't just any car. It had bulletproof glass an inch thick, heavy steel plating, and enough presence to make any law enforcement officer nervous. Police officers should think twice before trying to pull it over. The asking price is a cool $1 million, which, for such a famous car, might actually be a good deal. Finally, there were some shell cases that were allegedly fired during John Dillinger's final bank heist. If these were real, they would be amazing pieces of crime history connected to one of America's most famous outlaws. The seller had an interesting story about how his great-grandfather was at the scene and supposedly picked them up after the shootout. There was an old newspaper article about the crime, but here's the problem. Bullets don't have serial numbers. The markings on the casings were real. They matched ammunition from the right time period, but they could have come from anywhere. The seller's family connection was a great story, but it wasn't enough to seal the deal, because there was no solid proof of their origins. They were just old bullets in a plastic bag, and in the pawn business something can't be sold until it can be proven. Is this really from Dillinger's last stand, or is it just another lie? Leave a comment below, hit like and subscribe for more.